Welcome to the Blue Cafe. This is for the haters. We're not conceding, just giving you something to shut you up so we can go back to our comment-heavy paradise in peace. We will feed you. Believe us. Now, on to the story. Found out how my wife got pregnant just a couple of months after our wedding. My wife and I met in early 2004. I was 27 and she was 25, gorgeous and had a youthful innocence about her. She turned heads everywhere we went. She also seemed genuinely kind and came from what appeared on the surface to be a great family. However, I had to learn the hard way that her beauty was only skin deep. We had a great relationship the first 6 months, but then red flags started to appear. I ignored them. Later in 2004, she got pregnant, mine confirmed years later, but began withholding closeness. She said it would get better and that it was just a phase because of the pregnancy. I believed her and proposed just before our daughter was born in May 2005. We married in 2006. Still not having resolved the love issues. She withheld closeness throughout the marriage. Even on the honeymoon. She continued to withhold it maybe once every 6 months through the first 3 years of our marriage. The stress for me was unbearable. She did decide to have love with me one time, however, finally initiating after a 6-month dry spell. She conveniently told me as I climaxed that she had forgotten to take her pill. Welcome our son in May 2009. Later that year, we were shocked when she was diagnosed with head and neck cancer after finding lumps on her neck. After lots of treatment and scans. However, the doctors told us in 2011 that they had misdiagnosed her cancer and that it was in fact cervical cancer caused by an STD HPV. Knowing how little we had closeness and that I hadn't been with anyone since before I met her. This was a red flag I couldn't ignore. I snooped on her phone and email and found a trove of emails and texts showing she had numerous affairs starting just months after we got together leading up to and all the way through the wedding. Then throughout the marriage up until her diagnosis. There were texts that indicated she didn't even know whose child our daughter was. Then more messages indicated she had terminated another person's child just a couple of months after our wedding, one that she had told me and her family was a failure. Worst of all, however, was finding the texts between her and another guy arguing about how she thought he had given her the HPV that caused her cancer. The enormity of it all was suffocating. When I confronted her, she denied everything. She told me I was crazy and that maybe that's why she had denied me. I'm mild-mannered to a fault, which she hated about me. She enjoyed confrontation and often used emotional outbursts to bully me when I would ask why we weren't having closeness. She had always had a hard time with accountability. But this was just infuriating. I began to lay out the evidence starting with the earliest affair in a dismissive voice. She said, "Oh, you know? I did not." I then showed more evidence. She would dismiss it as if it hadn't happened. Even with the evidence right there in front of her. I'd ask her if that was the extent of it. She'd say yes. Then I'd reveal more evidence and call her on her lies. This happened again and again until finally I just accepted she had no intention of coming clean or asking for forgiveness. I moved out in October 2011. Throughout our separation, she would repeatedly try to ask me to move back in by saying things that would make me feel pity for her. It feels like you're just waiting for me to die. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was. I just wanted to be reunited with my children and move on from the nightmare. I hated her and everything she had done. I didn't even bother filing for divorce. I knew cancer would eventually get her. It did on November 19, 2013. She died ugly and slowly, still trying to cover up all her lies and deceit. I raised our 2 children on my own now and we're thriving. As you can imagine, however, I'm riddled with trust issues that will probably never be resolved. One of the cheating, none of the reasons for the split. In fact, they never even talk about any of it at all, which for a guy who likes to talk about things to resolve them is very frustrating and uncomfortable. When we split, she begged me not to tell everyone why. But she said she told her family. I was fine with it, as I always viewed it as a private matter anyway. She then talks trash about me to the kids, friends, parents, in addition to the kids, teachers. I only found this out from her text messages after she died. It's not clear at all to me how honest she was with her family. However, since they never acknowledged it happened, I can only assume they either don't know at all, or they know and it's too difficult for them to talk about. I don't want to cause any pain for her family. I haven't dated since my daughter has my wife's old mobile phone, which she has refused to clear office. She likes to read old text conversations and keep contacts from back then. Unfortunately, this means she has come across the truth many times over, regardless of how thoroughly I clear the worst of the text messages. She's 16 and understands everything that happened. We have a very solid relationship and talk openly about it all. Nevertheless, she consults a therapist regularly to help heal, and ways that I can't help her with. My son knows about it all, but is completely disinterested. He's 12 now and was only 4 when she died after all. As a policy, I will not lie to them, even to protect them, as I feel strongly that lies are what led us to where we're at now. I can only imagine the emotional damage if they found out as adults and from someone other than me. I've continued to bring the kids up to visit where her family lives from where we live, about an 8-hour drive for the holidays, and for an extended time during the summers. For the most part, they're good people who are kind and did nothing to deserve being cut off from their grandkids. My kids love them. And they have lots of cousins in their extended family who are the same ages as my kids. They go out of their way to welcome us and I enjoy their company. The only odd part about all that is that her family has never acknowledged anything that happened. None of the cheating, none of the reasons for the split. In fact, they never even talk about any of it at all, which for a guy who likes to talk about things to resolve them is very frustrating and uncomfortable. When we split, she begged me not to tell everyone why. But she said she told her family. I was fine with it, as I always viewed it as a private matter anyway. She then talks trash about me to the kids, friends, parents, in addition to the kids, teachers. I only found this out from her text messages after she died. It's not clear at all to me how honest she was with her family. However, since they never acknowledged it happened, I can only assume they either don't know at all, or they know and it's too difficult for them to talk about. I don't want to cause any pain for her family. But I would like something they have that rightfully belongs to me: the rings, engagement and wedding. It's my assumption that since her mom and her sister cleared her room when she died, one of them took the rings. They probably did this at her request, perhaps to give them to my daughter later in life on a significant occasion. Regardless, I don't view them as ever having belonged to her because her cheating was so pervasive throughout our relationship. They only represent infidelity, and they can never be as meaningful or symbolic of anything to another person as they will be to me when I get rid of them forever. I sacrificed and saved and bought them for her when we had nothing. And I thought we were in love. Had I only known. The question for this crowd is, how do you stop thinking about it at all? It has been 8 years since she passed away and I go to bed at night and never fall asleep. I just rehash the arguments and conversations we had. I think about how I should have handled situations differently and how I should have stood up for myself sooner when the red flags started popping up. I do all this full well, knowing there's absolutely nothing I can do about it now. I've aged 24 years in the last 8. I'm 44 but I look 64. At this rate, I won't be here to offer fatherly advice when my kids get married, maybe have kids of their own. Emotionally, I'd like to achieve a sense of closure and redemption and stop beating myself up for all my blindness during those years of torment. We hope you have enjoyed today's episode. Please comment, like and subscribe. Cheers. Have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are.